So, you're curious about what changed for Scholar in Dawntrail. Well, Scholar didn't really get too much removed or changed. Energy drain still exists, which I know a lot of players were definitely expecting to get removed, myself included. And depending on the type of player that you are, this is either a good or bad change, but to me personally, Aetherflow management just adds another facet of optimization to the job, so I am content with it. Our ability to manage said Aetherflow has only gotten better with the reduced cooldown to Recitation coming, which we'll get into later. The only downfall to Energy Drain is that Square Enix technically has the balance for the damage trade-off into Aetherflow healing, otherwise it might lead to a weird disparity between its competition. Dissipation has also not been removed or changed in any way, meaning that the fairy is still removed from combat and you still gain 3 Aetherflow as a reward for using it. This is actually a pretty good thing for Scholar, as Dissipation is our core recovery tool when it comes to Aetherflow. It's a very essential prog tool for Scholars and would be devastating to lose it entirely. That being said, I do think it's archaic in design and I am very surprised it wasn't changed at all. Particularly due to the fact that they now added another tool to Scholar's kit that doesn't synergize well with it, meaning that Seraph, all fairy abilities, and Seraphism are locked under its effects. This leads to interesting decision making for the more hardcore Scholars, but it doesn't bode well for the more relaxed ones. Moving into some of the new actions Scholar has obtained, at level 92, Scholars will get Baneful Impaction. Now, after we use Chain Stratagem, we will now get a buff that lasts for 30 seconds that enables you to use an ability called Baneful Impaction, which is going to deal a total of 700 potency of damage over 15 seconds on and around the target used on. This is an upgrade for not only adding damage to our burst windows, but also when we are running dungeons or if there are ever multiple targets to attack in raids. It also being on the off GCD and not on a timer that drifts will make it a very efficient tool for dealing damage to these kinds of adds if the opportunity ever presents itself. Chain Stratagem has also been increased from 15 to 20 seconds, meaning it should be easier to land 6 energy drains and a Baneful Impaction under it without requiring Swiftcast. The next cooldowns we'll get are not only a cooldown reduction to Swiftcast at level 94, which lowers the recast time from 60 to 40 seconds, but also a potency upgrade through Tactician's Mastery, which increases the potency of our Biolysis and Broil. It's important to bring up that Rune 2 did not get an increase in potency, meaning that instead of taking a 75 potency loss for every Rune 2 we do, we'll now take a 95 loss. A part of me hopes this makes it into the live build, as this gives Scholars more incentive to optimize their casts, but I feel like this might be an oversight due to other skills like Macro, Toxicon, and Pneuma also not being increased. Oh yeah, I guess our 2 target damage also got slightly nerfed too, only being a 45 potency gain now. We'll see if these potency values make it into the live build though. To level 96, we get a trait upgrade to Succor that changes the ability Succor to Concitation. Concitation seems to be a direct upgrade to Succor with very minimal changes to how the core skill works. The base potency stays the same at 200, but the shield portion is increased from 160 to 180%, which equals out to be around 40 potency. This is kind of cool because this also buffs our emergency tactics due to the shield portion being turned into a heal. Now, the next one is probably the biggest change to Scholar in Dawntrail. Recitation got its cooldown reduced to 60 seconds. This is an absolutely insane fucking change, especially because Sage didn't get anything to compensate for it with. Square Enix seems to think that deployment tactics and Zoe are the equivalent of each other, and they are in theory, but Recitation is also the equivalent of Zoe. But how? Well, when using Zoe on your Creation Prognosis, we take the lowest common denominator value when it comes to planning our healing, which means when using Zoe, it always ends up being a 540 flat potency shield on the party. But when we use Recitation on Concitation, it also ends up being 540 potency. Huh, weird. This is because Recitation guarantees an automatic critical on the shield, which means this is the lowest common value, while Zoe always has to be taken as a non-critical. There is also a hidden benefit to Recitation, and that is that it scales off the critical modifier, and as of patch 6.4 best in slot, that takes the base mod of 1.5 to 1.616. This means a Recitation and Concitation shield in actuality is 582 potency. But let's not actually forget about deployment tactics, as that to Square Enix is actually the equivalent. When looking at deploy in almost all scenarios, it is paired with Recitation, meaning the default value of a non-buff Recitation ad loquium is 810 potency, and a Recitation manifestation is 972 potency. This changes to 873 and 1047 potency respectively when taking into consideration the patch 6.4 best in slot crit modifier. And with the reduction to Recitation being 60 seconds, this means for fights that have high hitting AoEs in 60-second intervals like P12 and E12, Scholars can alternate between a high value shield through Recitation deploy and then Recitation Concitation the next, letting Scholars not only manage their tools better, but just straight up give them more mitigation to their already extensive mitigation kit. But the Recitation change is not the end all of why Scholar will probably reign king as the mitigative healer in Dawntrail, as the next ability will also have an impact on that. Getting into their capstone ability, Seraphism. Unlocked at level 100, Seraphism is an insane multifaceted tool. It's a 3-minute cooldown that applies a 100 potency regen over the course of the duration of the skill, which ends up equaling out to a minimum of 700 potency over the 20 seconds. Not only this, but it also completely changes the effects of Succor and Adloquium to Accession and Manifestation, which in addition increases the base potency of the skills equal to a 20% healing increase, but also makes them instant cast for the entire duration of Seraphism. In combination with the above changes, it also reduces the cooldown of emergency tactics to 1 second, meaning under its effects, Scholar becomes a healing powerhouse for those 20 seconds, similar to how Neutral Sect works on Astrologian. There is one restriction to the ability, however, and it's that it does not synergize with Dissipation, as it requires the fairy to be on the field to meet usage requirements. As stated prior, this tool has so many ways you can use it. You can use it for movement mechanics that require healing. You can use it to increase the potency of your shields for one-off damage. You can use it for high outgoing damage moments like Harrowing Hell. You can even use it to handle damage if your co-healer dies in your left solo. Or if there's simply nothing else to use it on, you can just press it for the regen effect. There's just so many ways you can use Seraphism, but the primary use would probably be a buffer to your mitigation and or healing on the move. Seraphism in conjunction with the Recitation change is going to have a heavy impact on Scholar's mitigation potential, as Seraphism is basically a 20% healing increase built into their GCDs, meaning that they can further space out mitigation when using this action with Dissipation, giving them 2 20% healing buffs to work with on top of Fey Illumination's 10%. While talking about Seraphism, I think it's very important to bring up Philosophia from Sage. While Philosophia also increases their healing by 20%, its primary use will generally not be for mitigation, but for healing instead, unless mitigative damage just happens to line up with it. Overall, Scholar hasn't really changed too much at all, and instead has only gotten stronger moving into Dawntrail, and has also acquired some fixes to some of its issues with the gain of Seraphism and the reduced cooldown of Recitation. Scholar will still be a strong pillar of the party through its use of Expedient and strong mitigation, giving the party much more room for error over what its competition can bring. The job's fundamentals also remain a bit clunky, quote unquote, with Dissipation, Fairy Management, 8th Flow Management, and also having no instant cast that we can use for free outside of our dot, that will give players seeking avenues of optimization still something to strive for. I'm excited to see what Dawntrail has in store for us Scholar players, and I can't wait to play it moving forward. In the next video, we'll be going over White Mage, so I'll see you there.